Five Nights at Freddy's. If you're watching this video, you probably already have a basic understanding of the series. But did you know it was considered a horror game at one point? Yeah, me neither. I feel like there's a reason the modern FNaF games seem to have lost a lot of their fear factor. Obviously, you could talk about the fact that games are now pushed more towards children, or how the lore is almost seeming to overshadow the games themselves now, which may partially be the case, but I believe there's more to this issue than a simple change in direction. So today, I want to take a peek at what I believe made this franchise at one point the horror icon it was. And to do that, we're going to have to talk about the shadows. Oh, no silly, not those kind of shadows. Although I'm sure I have plenty to say about RWQFSFASXC. Nailed it, yeah! I actually wanted to talk about real shadows. With shadows, or more simply the dark, being used in the horror medium for years at this point. So how did the first few games use shadows so well? And why do I believe it's so important? Well, if you really want to know, you'll just have to watch this video to see. Yep, there's your hook. Hook, line, and sinker.
Swarm of bears?
Yeah.
Herd of bears?
Yeah, I've heard of bears.
With the first few FNaF games being of the resource management variety, all about keeping yourself safe until 6 AM while keeping track of the animatronics, you might already be able to imagine how the use of shadows for gameplay makes perfect sense. Especially when looking at the first game, where you have to keep a close eye on them, so as to be prepared if they ever wander over to your office. With both Bonnie and Chica playing a similar role, with them both for the most part being very easy to find on any camera with very few exceptions, you'll for the most part be able to find them whenever needed. All of that though contrasts with Freddy in this game, when after a few nights of easily being able to locate the animatronics, now suddenly it's impossible to find one, with almost every camera he's on having only a portion of him being visible, with that only being the whites of his eyes. So now if you ever want to find him, it will take away time from me finding the others. And despite being the face of the game, the only time we get to see him fully is when it's already too late. Unfortunately, FNaF 2 doesn't use shadows quite as well when it comes to the gameplay, because unlike in FNaF 1, where you have to keep track of each of the characters, this game usually has your camera in one place and one place alone, the music box, which I find really upsetting for a multitude of reasons, but especially because it seems like we lost a really cool gimmick, with the game relying on the flashlight. So obviously you want to reserve power, and on the cameras you can use it, so you can see if there's any animatronics there, and I kinda wish this was actually a part of the gameplay. Sort of like the fog in Plants vs. Zombies, where like the shadows it's hard to tell what and who's in them, and you can use your resources if you think you need to know who's there in that moment. But as you get more experience with the game, you can more easily tell who's there and won't have to waste any energy on it. But since you most likely won't ever be using more than one camera, it's safe to say that's out the window. Hey, just like Charlie. Oh, too soon? So for now, we can skip over FNaF 2 and go straight into FNaF 3. If FNaF 1 used shadows well, then FNaF 3 mastered it, with Springtrap being the only one you have to keep track of, and it quickly becomes a game of cat and mouse. And with the whole place being dark and puke green, he practically blends right in. And instead of just hiding in the dark like Freddy, he simply takes advantage of his surroundings. He even seems to be aware of what he's doing, purposely standing almost out of view, standing in the shadows, and hiding behind corners, as if he's learning where all these blind spots are. Another thing I appreciate about this game is the fact that he has multiple positions on some of the cameras, so if the player gets used to looking for him in the same spot every time, he could suddenly be standing somewhere else. Yeah, he's a real nightmare to deal with. Oh shoot! FNaF 4 is sort of the last game to really use shadows in the gameplay, where you have to watch the nightmare animatronics, with any of the nightmare animatronics either being down the hall where they can quickly pull themselves back behind the corner, which is sort of one of the only uses of shadows in this game. What's seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood. Then use shadows in this game, like come on! It's sad to see it's barely used in this game. With the exception of them hiding behind corners, they're pretty easy to notice. But considering the lack of cameras, I can't really blame it all too much. Besides, I'm sure there'll be plenty more examples when they bring back cameras to the series. Let's see our next game. Okay, the game after that. Okay, maybe the game after that. See, now that's something I can work with. Let's see these... Okay, we can just move on.
What if just everything goes black and it never turns back on?
I've always thought a major part of horror, at least for me, is the idea of not knowing, which is why I believe the dark is considered scary. You no longer know what's in there with you, making what you do see scary, and what you don't far worse. I think this applies especially well to shadows hiding the features of something, such as someone's face or body, where the shadows can abstract something to the point where your brain can barely read the information it's taking in. We can see this best in one of Foxy's renders from the first game, where the shadows sort of consume his body, with him almost looking like Mangle with how contorted he looks here, especially with the fuzzy, blurry quality of the cameras in these games. Even when looking at a better quality image, it still doesn't look quite right. While you can better see his body as a whole, his head is still tilted at this odd 90-degree angle to stare at the camera. I feel like this could have even inspired his mechanic in UCN, where just like Mangle, Foxy can remove pieces of his body, detaching and reattaching however he wants. Speaking of Mangle, one of the reasons I feel FNaF 2 doesn't hold up quite as well nowadays is because you don't really get to know these characters very well. Despite their great designs, I think the first game did a better job at giving you a personal relationship with each of the animatronics, and I believe this issue could have easily been solved if we actually got the chance to see them on the cameras. But because of the music box, most people never do, which is a shame considering you can tell how much effort was put into each of them, and this especially goes for Mangle. Well, sort of. For some reason, on certain cameras, she isn't actually there like the others, whose models are probably there in the renders, while Mangle for some reason is just overlaid onto the screen, which in-game with the static doesn't always look horrible, but once you notice it, especially with the flashlights not having an effect on them, you can tell the lighting doesn't quite match, which is odd, because you can tell a lot of work went into making her look as unnerving as possible. And although I'm picking at it, I'm pretty sure most of the community doesn't even know this is a thing, and perhaps it's simply one of those once you notice it, you can't unsee it situations. So I'm sorry if I ruined these screens for you. But even with that, the use of harsh shadows, especially with Mangle's already, well, mangled body. Thank you. It still does a good job at making an already scary character look, unnerving. And even with that, they still more than make up for this with Mangle's model in FNaF 3. And fun fact, Phantom Mangle is the only animatronic in this game to not have their model appear in the extras menu, which is actually because I don't actually know. Let's go ask them. Oh my god.
I think there's someone hanging right there.
I know I've been focusing a lot on the Foxies, but that's simply because for some reason they tend to have it the best in these games, such as in Sister Location's Custom Night. Just like in the first game, when they're in their last cycle before leaving Pirate's Cove, we get a look at Funtime Foxy with these harsh shadows covering most of their body, with for the most part only their eyes shining through. But for some reason, they're one of the only characters in this game to really take advantage of the harsher lighting, at least in the Custom Night. We see better examples of this when we look at things like the title screen, Ballora in the game's 4th night, and especially with Ennard in both the endings. We get two great examples of how these shadows can really let the horror of these designs shine through, especially with the use of pupils, being a major part of why both these designs and many others work so well. But if you want to hear more of my thoughts on Ennard, you could just go watch the video I made about them. There are a ton of examples, but instead, since so many of these characters are arguably already scary, you could say the shadows simply play into their already good designs. So how about I show you how the use of these shadows can even fix one of the most hated characters in the series.
I asked for no pickles and they gave me the fucking McPickle Pounder. What the fuck is this shit?
For most of this video, I've used examples of characters that are already arguably scary, so instead, I want to talk about one of the most hated designs in the series, the one and only Mr. Afton. More specifically, this Afton. I've been a Scrap Trap defender for quite a while now. Not that I think it's a particularly great design, nor do I believe it's an improvement over Springtrap's original design, but instead because of how it's presented in the game. The first time we see him, he's fully draped in shadow, slumped over, and frail, yet somehow his presence still seems intimidating, and when he finally does move, he tilts his head back, almost looking smug or even cocky, which I feel is very in character for him. And this goes for the other characters as well, with this section of gameplay always being the most horrifying for me. You get to see these characters mere inches away from your face, when they look their most terrifying, and the game forces you to stare at them, to focus all of your attention on them, because even the slightest shift in movement or subtle sound could mean life or death. Well, I mean, you technically don't die, but you lose out on like $5,000, so in this economy you're basically dead. It even manages to make a character like Lefty look scary. A character with almost the same model as Rockstar Freddy, who looks like the only thing he could hurt is a former president. You see, the joke being he likes money, and most presidents are on money, and Rockstar Freddy, you don't have to do this, put the weapon down! Even when looking at the secret images you can find of them, slumped over and seemingly non-functional, are still somehow unnerving. This is why I also feel a lot of the office section is lacking, especially when it comes to the jump scares. Not just because they look like that, but because you get a good few seconds after the jump scare to just look at them, losing all momentum, yet somehow looking even more lifeless than when they're supposed to look practically dead. And then you compare that to when the place is set to flames. You can see the dread in William's face as he claws at the vents. The use of chiaroscuro. Yes, I am very smart, and I know big words. The use of it in this series is what I think makes it so scary, showing so much emotion that may have been lost without it. But sadly, as the games progressed, this art form was lost along the way, slowly falling by the wayside. So how about we look at those games?
Sipping on the Dr. P soda. Soda.
I just wanted to let you know your bars are freaking trash. Never pick up a microphone ever again.
As FNaF eventually moved over to Steel Wool, it quickly became clear that something was missing. Obviously, the games were never going to perfectly match Scott's style, but with the series no longer being point-and-click games, and instead now fully in 3D, those shadows that were once a part of every game were sort of lost in transition, where before, every render could carefully be composed to look their best, due to the fact they were mostly static images. But now, everything has to exist in the third dimension. And because of that, even when these characters are perfectly replicated, they never quite look as scary as they used to. And I don't really want to pin the blame on Steel Wool. It's clearly an issue that stems from the shift in the game's design, which to me ended up leaving behind a huge part of FNAF's core identity. But do I think this means this art form for the series is lost? No. At least, not entirely. Even if it's harder to pull off in a fully rendered game, it can still be done. And it already has been. In Help Wanted's Curse of Dreadbear DLC, there's a level by the name Hallway Crawl, where the player has to crawl through a pitch-black hallway and make their way to the FNAF 4 bedroom, while having to avoid Nightmare Bonnie and Chica, who occasionally appear from behind the doors. And as the level goes on, Nightmare Freddy eventually starts approaching from behind to keep the player moving. And every so often, when the lightning flashes, and you can actually see the hallway, there's a chance that Nightmare Foxy will be there, and you have to stay still as to not cause him to jump scare you. And I believe this level truly understands how to use shadows in these games, both with the horror aspect with the way the shadows hit Foxy's face, the harsh red lights that go on Chica and Bonnie, and the way Freddy slowly becomes more and more visible as he approaches. But also it's properly used in the gameplay, with it still being possible for you to even see Foxy within the dark. He can even turn into his plushie form. Aww. And I think it's important not to lose this, with these newer games still having the potential to use shadows the way the old games once did, and possibly even in new and more interesting ways. And maybe this could even make FNAF scary again. Who knows? Howdy everyone! With this being my last video for the year, I just wanted to say thank y'all for the support. And I'm sorry if this video was a bit rushed. I had more I wanted to say on this subject, but also wanted to get out before the end of the year. But if you all enjoyed this video and think I should make another on the subject, I'll consider it. But for now, I just want to say thanks again for such a great year, and for watching my dinky little videos. I have a lot planned for next year, but until then, I'll be seeing y'all later. Have a great day, and I'll see y'all next year. Bye bye.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.